Hey, what is going on guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the jungle tier list for patch 8.12. I am running an RP giveaway as well right now, so if you're interested in that, then there will be a link down in the description below. So tier 1 in this patch, to start it off here, is going to be Taliyah. So Taliyah saw buffs last patch and they completely turned her into one of the strongest junglers, if not the strongest jungler in the game. This patch she did get hit with a little nerf, but it didn't really move her too much. She's still an S tier pick in my opinion for 8.12, so if you are looking for a good AP jungler right now, then Taliyah is going to be your best option in this patch. Now, not only did Taliyah benefit a ton from the buff she got, she also just fits really well into the meta right now. We're in a pretty early game focused meta. We're in this scuttle meta to where whichever jungler can secure scuttle crab in the early game and whichever jungler can get their lanes ahead is most likely going to win the game. So with Taliyah being able to clear out single target camps very fast in the early game, it allows her to be on the map and be looking for ganks really early on. She's also got her passive, which allows her to get around the map faster than any other jungler in the game, so she can just do a really good job at snowballing lanes and being in so many places at once in 8.12. Now, if you are thinking about picking up Taliyah though, you do have to be a little bit careful because she's definitely not the easiest jungler to pick up. It's going to take you a little bit to get her combos down and get used to landing her W consistently, but once you do get this champion down, once you can hit your combos consistently, and once you can learn your matchups and know your limits, then she's going to be a very strong pick for you in this patch. So almost the exact opposite of Taliyah, Xin Zhao is one of the easiest junglers to pick up in the game, at least in my opinion. It's only going to take you probably at least 5 to 10 games to get the hang of this jungler, and he's going to be one of the strongest junglers once you do end up putting a few games on him. He can level 2 gank in the early game really effectively, and this just allows him to be one of the strongest junglers in this meta. He can level 2 gank mid, level 2 gank bot, and if you can get that gank off successfully, it can just give your lane so much pressure in the early game, and that one gank, if you pull it off well, it could just end up winning the entire game. He is one of the best skirmishing and dueling junglers in the early game as well. There's very few other junglers that can actually match up with him in the early game, so that just makes him a great pick in this current meta as well. So next up here is going to be Shaco, and you can probably see a trend starting to develop in this video here. A lot of the junglers that are super good in this patch do have the ability to have a really good impact in the early game, and Shaco is definitely no exception to that. You just have so many options with Shaco in the early game, and if you can play his early game well, then you can just really take over the game with Shaco. You can look to go for an invade if the enemy jungler is playing a weaker early game jungler because you do have the ignite. You can also look to level 2 gank with him, and that can be very successful for you as well. So you can just do a lot of different things in the early game in this patch on Shaco, and you can have great success with it. Shaco is basically the new Kha'Zix in this patch. He's the best assassin right now. After Kha'Zix did get nerfed, he's definitely not as strong as he used to be, and Shaco is that jungler that if he can get a lead now, if he can get ahead in the early game, then he's just going to keep killing you over and over again, and it's going to be very hard to deal with this champion in solo queue. Now, as for the rune setup on Shaco, Dark Harvest was the keystone players were running in previous patches, but because we are more so in an early game focused meta right now, Dark Harvest is not going to be as effective, so more Shaco mains and more Shaco 1 tricks have been running Electrocute now, and that is also the one that does have the best win rate on him in this patch. So next up here we do have Camille. Now I would say that Camille does have the best level 2 ganks in the game. You can definitely argue for Xin Zhao for that spot, but I would say that if you can play Camille well, if you know her E flash combo on her, and if you can get good level 2 ganks off in the early game, then you're going to be able to have great early game pressure with Camille in 8.12. I would say that in this patch, Camille is the better early game jungler than Xin Zhao and the better jungler at level 2 ganking if you can play her well. If you can only play her at an average level and you're not super good at Camille, then I would say that Xin Zhao is the better jungler because you don't need as much time and practice on Xin Zhao to be able to play him at a good level, whereas with Camille, I do think you definitely need a little bit more time and more practice to really make this champion shine. If you can get ahead in the early game though as Camille, she's one of the best dive junglers at level 6. She can drop aggro with her ultimate, so if you can get your lanes ahead and you can just set up dives bot lane, they're going to be very easy to pull off as long as you do know when to drop aggro with your ultimate and you do know how to pull off dives successfully. So Graves is still tier 1 here for yet another patch. He did end up getting a nerf in 8.11, but that didn't really affect him too much. He's still doing very well right now in 8.12. He might not be the strongest jungler in this patch, and he is definitely a little bit harder to play than some of the other junglers on this list here, but I do still think that if you can play Graves at a high level, then he's going to be a very good jungler for 8.12. So for patch 8.12 here, more and more players are starting to go Stormrazor's second item on Graves now. A lot of high elo Graves players are going this now, and it actually does have the best win percent for any second item on Graves. So if you've yet to try out Stormrazor as your second item on Graves, then I definitely recommend it. He's also a jungler right now that can complement the bot lane meta pretty well. If your team is playing something that is not ranged in the bot lane, if you're playing something like a Mordekaiser AD carry or a Yasuo or just any melee bot lane champion, then Graves can do a good job of complementing that because he is a ranged jungler. He's one of the best ranged junglers, or he is the best ranged jungler in this patch right now. So even though your bot lane doesn't have an AD carry, Graves can act, or he can serve as that AD carry once it does reach the mid to late game, and you're not really losing out on a ton if your bot lane does decide to go a melee champion. And then lastly here, to round out the S tier for this patch is going to be Udyr. So I've decided to move Udyr up into tier 1 for this patch, just mainly because he's got such good dueling potential at level 2, and pretty much every time I've seen an Udyr over the past patch or so, he's been able to outduel the enemy jungler at level 2. He's been able to contest Scuttle like every single time, and his level 2 skirmish and level 2 duel I just think right now is so strong, which makes him a great pick for this meta. Because he does have the point and click stun with his E, and because he can very quickly proc press the attack with his Q, it means that he's going to be able to outduel almost any other jungler if he does get the jump on them. Even if he doesn't get the jump on the enemy jungler, because he can lock them down so easily and because he can put out a lot of damage very quickly, it just allows him to really thrive in this early game meta. So for tier 1.5 S- tier, these champions do have the potential to be tier 1 in my opinion for this patch if you can play them well. For Lee Sin and for Nidalee, I would say that you definitely need a lot more games on these picks in order to be able to play them at a tier 1 level, so that's why I do have them in tier 1.5. For Warwick, I do think he is still a great jungler. He's very easy to pick up, very effective jungle pick, but I think the tier 1 champions just do his job a little bit better right now. He doesn't have as much of an ability to level 2 gank in the early game as the tier 1 junglers, and he can't put out as much pressure as those picks, so that's why I do have him in tier 1.5. Now as for Nocturne, I think this pick can have really good success in this patch and in this meta right now because we did see AD carry's base stats get nerfed in 8.11, and we're also seeing the bot lane meta shape out to be a lot more aggressive and a lot more aggro in this patch. We're seeing a lot of these like Yasuo Alistair lanes and Mordekaiser lanes now, and if you can get a good level 6 gank off down bot lane with Nocturne, you can do a really good job at snowballing the game out of control. If you do get a lead in the early game as well, you're just going to be continuously able to one-shot the AD carry because AD carries just take a lot longer to scale now. They're going to be a lot weaker in the early game, and with your Nocturne ultimate, it's just so easy for you to just one-shot them over and over and just make them very useless throughout the game. And then for Pantheon, I think Pantheon is one of the most underrated junglers for this patch. He's got a very good early game. He's super easy to play. His level 2 ganks are also really good, and he does have pretty good scuttle control as well. So if you're looking for just a simple, strong jungler in this meta, then I'd recommend trying out Pantheon. So for tier 2 picks in this patch, not too much has changed from the previous time I did a tier list. I did move Kha'Zix down from tier 1 into tier 2 because of the alt nerfs. He's definitely not performing as well as he used to. I did move Kindred up in this patch. I had her tier 3 in last patch. I'm moving her into tier 2 for this patch because she did get those direct buffs in 8.12 and they are really helping her out. And I do think she is a pretty good jungler now and a pretty strong pick in this patch. And then as for these tier 3 or B tier picks in this patch, a lot of these junglers are just really fragile right now, and they really can't compete with a lot of the tier 1 and tier 2 junglers in this meta. None of these picks can really contest Scuttle Crab at level 2. Fiddlesticks, Hecarim, Maokai, Zac, Amumu, all these junglers just don't really have good level 2 dueling potential, and because of that, if you fall behind in the early game with these junglers, if you can't get a Scuttle Crab and the enemy jungler is playing someone like a Xin Zhao or a Camille, then they're just going to completely take over the game, and you're going to be useless for pretty much the entire game, unless for some reason or somehow it magically does reach the 35 to 40 minute point. So that is going to be all for this video, guys. I would definitely be looking to prioritize these strong early game junglers for 8.12. I feel like if you're playing a tank jungler or just a jungler that doesn't really do too much in the early game, you are going to have a harder time finding success in this patch. With that being said though, guys, if you did enjoy the video, then be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you have yet to already. So thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.